So what's up, YouTube? It's Clappy here, and I'm going to be giving you a talking desktop video of why the whole Intel versus AMD debate is actually a misnomer. So if you would just like to look over this chat GPT, which I'll give a talking voiceover over of, it's come to my attention that before 3D Vcache became a big engineering idea for AMD, we used to get 600 FPS on the 10 nanometer Intel. Now, I know you might be saying, yeah, just let Intel go, but this is actually some really interesting stuff here. So if you would just take a look at this. So can you give me an example of some game engine instructions that favor 3D Vcache over Intel? For example, some dynamic programming, because I know that that has cache built into it. Why does Intel literally get like 40%, sometimes half of AMD when they used to get the same 600 FPS? And I'm not going to read every time, but I'm going to give a big throughput, a big overview of everything that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to become a tech channel, but I want to do this naturally and organically, and I want to be knowing what I'm talking about, because as someone that has come from Intel twice, bought an AMD CPU just to see the same AM dips on the 5000 series back when they had DDR4, even though I overclocked the snot out of a 5950X or such, and still comes to the idea that Intel is now better. I've been asking artificial intelligence about what has been going wrong, and this is a great example of why certain things are ideas, or why certain things are coming to mind. So let's just take an example. Here's a clean, direct example, explanation of the actual kinds of engine level instructions, algorithms, and patterns that cause 3D Vcache AMD CPUs to outperform Intel by 40 to 50% in some games, even when Intel's singled threaded performance is the same or higher. I'm just going to you can pause the video and just go through all of it. I've trained my ChatGPT to give me some really unuser-friendly idea, but if you want to get the full idea of what you're actually buying and you don't really care about the FPSs, as somebody who spent thousands of dollars on setups and are going to continue to do so, but in a more stratified way, I just want to get the information out there just to be the bearer of bad news. Intel is the actual better engineering team, and AMD has a schema that just works for what we are now seeing in the modern era of game development. And I want you to mark my words that at the end of the video, there's going to be some things where I'm going to talk about and just going on a rant. And until then, it's going to be Clappy, just giving you what right now. So why did Intel get 600 FPS before, but not now? Because games used to be compute bound. Today, many engines, especially UE5 and next gen engine, are cache bound, memory bound, traversal bound, nanite, virtualized, content heavy, simulation heavy. When the working set is greater than Intel's level 3 cache, but less than AMD's 3 V cache, AMD keeps it in L3, Intel goes to RAM, end of the story. And this can produce a difference. It's not that Intel is weaker, it's workloads that shifted towards memory sensitive algorithms. So you might be saying, well, why do I care about that? I'm just a gamer. I just want to be getting all the FPS. Yeah, and I'm the gamer too. I've just been building PCs every so often because I haven't been getting the performance I've been wanting, and it's becoming rather annoying because you can mark people's words like Linus, where they get, where competition is actually good for the consumer. Well, here's an example of where competition isn't actually good for the consumer, because you have one camp doing throughput engine, doing through-point ALU FPU compute. You have one team that's literally saying, don't do any of that and just store it in a massive L3 cache. One type of engineering sent us to the moon with 96 kilobytes of L3 cache. Shout out to my people who think that the moon landing is fake, but I digress. And you have one team that's saying, forget the proper engineering and just store it in a massive L3 cache. Like for like, Intel is stronger. And this is a proven fact. But it turns out that AMD just has a schema that just makes getting onto the ceiling of game development, and has lowered it and made it so that way you can sloppily code something and like for like you win. But this is actually not the greatest, because Intel is going to just slap on the same 3D V cache. Well, they not call it 3D V cache, they might just call it whatever, I cache, whatever you want to call it. But and it's going to Intel is going to be the first one that's going to give us 1,000 FPS. So you can mark my words. All right, now do the opposite. So one of you guys that think that I'm an Intel fanboy, it's actually quite the opposite. But I also understand why people might be upset at Intel, because one, they did in the 2010s give us the same product over and over again, but with minor IPC increasements, and two, they weren't really pushing the envelope of engineering. But when there's no competition, whose side is actually right? People who actually know how to engineer and do it incorrectly, or the people that will push out a product for the ramification of not dying, if you will. Even though I know AMD thrives because they have because they're manufacturing consoles and whatnot, but that's neither here nor there. So now do the opposite. Give me some in-game examples where Intel is favored, because I keep the trips to RAM minute, and the theoretical performance on Intel and AMD are the same, because we are now limited by, could you fill in this parenthetical, as I believe, here you go, the exact opposite scenario. Real engine level examples where Intel is favored over AMD 3D V cache, because the workload avoids trips to RAM, and performance becomes limited by pure instruction throughput, pipeline execution rate, rather than memory. I will state the parenthetical cleanly. Instruction throughput, bench prediction, frequency scaling, extra compute availability, that's where the cache advantage disappears. Below are precise cases where Intel wins due to architecture, and AMD's 3D V cache brings little to no benefit. As a math major, this is the stuff that interests me, because I am someone who had once aspirations of being a computer engineer myself, so I find stuff like this fascinating. And I'm just pissed that I lost my 600 FPS, because now everybody is doing the same cache instruction sets rather than proper engineering. So you might be saying, well, sucks to suck, get Intel. Well, I mean, get AMD. But I promise you, as someone who's had the AM dip, and there's going to be examples of where I give you some link to some really good channels, such as Danny Reviews, where they show the difference of how people show the difference between AMD and Intel, and show that Intel actually has more stable 1% lows. So they got to be doing something more right, especially when the throughput is that high. When we're talking like 64 versus 64 Battlefield 6 servers, Intel actually wins with the 64 with the 3D V cache, might I add. So I'm not going to brute force you and give you an engineering workload when you're somebody that just wants to play games. It's just, it grinds my gears when I see that Intel is getting bashed because, well, they did up the voltage to 1 point, and anybody that knows how to overclock could have easily dodged the whole Intel CPU melting. But I mean, it's up to us as a community to, one, know what the fuck we're doing, just so that way we don't have to rely on a narrative to push what we actually think is actually correct, and two, just know what you're doing. Because back when I started playing Crossfire in the 2010s, learning how to overclock actually netted me a big performance. I'm talking like 75 hertz and an extra like 50 FPS, but that was the end all be all back then. So yeah. Also, final thing is, coding for 3D VCAS easier than raw throughput. And lo and behold, as I scroll through all of this, 1 second. Yes, coding for 3D cache is much easier. Long answer, coding for throughput requires SIMD tuning, scheduling instructions manually, branch optimization, and careful pipeline timing, avoiding stalls, etc. So, lo and behold, one type of engineering sent us to the moon on knowing how to do what to do with memory and knowing how and the exact optimizations to code for, knowing the ramifications of our computers back then. And one is good because we can probably S out a bunch of games, you know, and by I say S, I mean, yeah, just, S out a bunch of games just because we want to make it easier for the engineering team. If you don't know how to engineer, what are you doing making a game? As someone who wants to be making their own IP about something very soon, and that's going to be up on YouTube very soon, so please follow and subscribe, and I'll keep you guys updated on that, but that's neither here nor there. Again, lo and behold, just take it not with a grain of salt, but I want you guys to just take the brute force of what I just had to do, what I came to the realization of. One team doesn't know how to engineer, so we make it easier for them. And it turns out that these are the same people that are on consoles. And mark my words, consoles are going to become anachronistic if this continues. And I would just like to add, make time to hone your craft, not to make a product. Anybody who's in the engineering side of things, and there's more things I could be talking about, but let's not do that. Let's talk about just honing your craft. If you're someone who wants to be an engineer, be an engineer. Because I don't see why you wouldn't be the one to say we need to be coding for both, as I know that both are possible. It's a computer. You can do anything behind a computer screen if you're that savvy enough. And two, stop pushing for things to become easier, because there are some great minds in here, which I'm not speculating, that have done things like send people to the moon, made phones with, we're talking like less than a gigabyte of RAM. Shout out to the first iPhone. We're talking that stuff like this wouldn't have been possible if those people before you didn't know what they were doing to a much higher extent than do you know what you're doing now, with the same level, with a much greater level of hardware. We should be limited by the mind by now. We shouldn't be limited by an instruction set. We shouldn't be limited by cache, even though I know that, I do have to say, just from a user who's, that's a dilettante, and what ramifications, is it possible to make a megabyte of L1 cache or L2 cache without skyrocketing the price of the product? Who knows? But if you were to do that and take it a step further, why not aim for a unification of everything instead of just making where one wins over the other, when long and behold, it's all about computing? And that's Clappy out.